What's up guys, AD back with another Destiny Child video, and in today's video everyone, we are going to be overviewing units that you should prepare for the upcoming collaboration world boss featuring Soul from Guilty Gear Strive. So hopefully you guys can manage to prepare some of these units for our upcoming world boss arriving next week, since Hot Time will be active later today. But before we get started everyone, make sure to leave a like on this video, as well as be sure to subscribe to the channel, and of course if you haven't yet done so already, check out channel memberships down below if you're interested in further supporting the channel, and a huge thank you to all of the members that have joined so far. But with all of that out of the way, let's get started here with the recommendations, of course beginning with the water type attackers, since this will be a fire type world boss trial. So for our first recommendation here, we do have the water type attacker in Shadow Cassia. Now of course Cassia is a percentage based world boss attacker, so she will be dealing a ton of damage. As you can see on her slide skill, for the rank 7 fully ignited stats, we have 210.2% of percentage damage here on Cassia's slide, so she will be dealing a ton of damage. Now of course you may not have a slot for Cassia potentially, considering we may have a chance of a water type attacker arriving with this collaboration as well. So if the water type collab unit does happen to be an attacker, you may not have a slot for Cassia, unless of course she is fully ignited like mine here. Definitely just take that into consideration. We may have a water type attacker arriving with the upcoming world boss trial, but of course Cassia will still be one of the best picks here for the water type attackers. Now of course next up here we do have Flower of Justice Mafdet. She is another world boss centered attacker here. As you can see here, she does have world boss trials in her tap skill kit, and she does happen to be a 6-hit slider as well upon being fully ignited. So Flower of Justice Mafdet is another great option for your attacker team. And next here we do have Eve, of course, the water type attacker. Many of you should manage to have Eve, as of course she was featured in the recent Lisa's Extra Lessons, and of course she's just a good general attacker to have. As you can see, she does have poison in her kit, and she also does happen to be a 6-hit slider upon being fully ignited, so Eve is another great option for the event. And moving on here, we do have a new water type attacker that was recently just introduced in River's Flowing Air. So if you don't happen to have many of the other attackers, and let's say you just started out in Destiny Child Global, then Air will be a great option, as she does manage to scale to a 6-hit slide upon being fully ignited. So she's a great option and will come in handy if you don't happen to have many 6-hit sliders. So definitely a great attacker option here as well. And last but not least, for a budget attacker, I would recommend Thanatos here, as he is great unignited as well. You do have an amazing tap skill here, as he does hit for 4 times here on his tap skill. So I would definitely recommend to run Thanatos, of course, on your team. If you don't have many of the other options, of course, do not ignite this unit. I don't recommend it at all. I honestly made a mistake by giving him some cores, but nonetheless a great unignited option here for the world boss trial. Definitely if you don't happen to have any of the 6-hit sliders fully ignited. So that'll pretty much be it for our attacker recommendations. Make sure just to keep in mind that we may have a water type attacker arriving with the upcoming trial, so we'll just have to wait and see with the next week's patch notes. Moving on to the supporter category, everyone, we do have a ton of recommendations here. So let's get started with the first being 5-star Anemone. Of course, Anemone is amazing now in all areas of the game due to her recent buffs with her past Ragnarok event. So you could expect Anemone to be used a ton. She is amazing here. Her slide skill is very strong, and she does help with nullifying debuffs here on the tap skill. And of course, the invincibility on her slide as well is very amazing. She also does heal on her tap skill, which will be very sought out for in the world boss trial. So definitely make sure to add Anemone onto your team. And moving on here, we do have the water type supporter Arat. She will be very strong here due to her tap skill, since she does have the skill gauge charge speed plus for 2 turns for 2 allies here, prioritizing the attackers of course, and this does happen to be after ignition, but nonetheless she still is an amazing water type supporter and you should consider using her for the world boss trial. So definitely a great option here for Arat. And moving on, we do have another water type supporter in Summer Davi. She is great for the world boss trial since she does happen to have double-edged sword, and it's recommended to have your Summer Davi ignited to 3 stars since this will help with the double-edged sword targeting. So she will prioritize the highest attack here on her slide now upon being ignited to 5 out of 12. So do keep that in mind if you would like to help your Davi out in the targeting, but nonetheless a great unit for the Fire World Boss Trial events. Definitely make sure to add Summer Davi onto your team. And moving on, we do have a staple water type supporter in Guillotine. Of course, Guillotine is our offensive stance supporter, so you will definitely want to add Guillotine onto your team. As you can see, her drive skill here, she does prioritize the attackers for the offensive stance, so definitely a very strong supporter here. Her slide skill is also very amazing as well, so you'll definitely want to add Guillotine onto your roster. She is a must-have for the World Boss Trial events. And moving on here, we do have a water type supporter in Quirky Theophano. Theophano is an amazing water type attacker as well. I would say she is a staple for the water type team alongside Guillotine as well. So as you can see, based on the slide skill here, she is very strong due to the skill gauge charge speed plus for 2 turns here. On world bosses, she does also have drive gauge charge amounts plus here for 3 water type allies for 2 turns, and for the drive skill here, she actually does grant focus. So this is a very strong unit. Definitely make sure to add Theophano onto your team as she is one of the best water type supporters for the world boss trials. Moving on to the next set of recommendations for the supporters here, everyone, we do have Leo. Now Leo is a great option as of course he does have skill gauge charge amounts plus, as well as the weak point skill final blow plus for 3 water type allies for 2 turns. So definitely an amazing slide skill there. He also does help on the tap skill with the skill gauge plus to 2 water type allies, excluding himself of course. And if the boss does happen to have bleed, then his tap skill is a must since he does convert the bleed to regeneration. So definitely an amazing water type supporter here in Leo. You'll want to make sure to add him onto your roster as well. And moving on, we do have another water type supporter in Thisbe. Thisbe will be great alongside Anemone since Thisbe of course does have here on her slide skill gauge plus for 3 allies, as well as the skill cooldown minus. Of course this is after ignition, but still nonetheless an amazing water type supporter, and you'll manage to see her on many world boss teams. Now some may drop her if they are an endgame player or don't happen to have a slot for her, so if you do see some teams without Thisbe, just keep that in mind. But for you beginner players and for you more intermediate players, I would still recommend to use Thisbe here. She also does have skill gauge charge amounts plus here on her tap skill, which is helpful as well. Now moving on, we do have our latest supporter in the light type supporter string Jachungbi. Now Jachungbi will be a staple for all world boss trials going forward, as of course her tap skill here does have the universal chance to end cooldown, so this does work in any game mode, and you'll definitely want to take advantage of her tap skill in the world boss trial. Of course it's recommended to ignite her to at least 2 stars, so I would recommend you all to do that before the event does begin if you're interested in using her for the world boss trial. So the tap skill will be highly prioritized for our upcoming world boss event, so just keep that in mind there for Jachungbi. And moving on, we do have some of the wood type supporters, starting out with Newbie Mona. Now Newbie Mona is very amazing when you do happen to have 3 attackers of the same type fully ignited, but regardless she still is an amazing wood type supporter for the world boss trials. So definitely make sure to add Newbie Mona onto your team if you do happen to have this amazing wood type supporter. And moving on, we do happen to have Maid Citri here, which does happen to be another amazing wood type supporter here, since we do happen to run a ton of wood type debuffers and supporters in pretty much any world boss trial. Citri is very helpful. She does have slide skill final blow plus and the skill gauge charge amounts for wood type allies here in her slide skill, and of course her tap skill, which is very highly prioritized due to the skill gauge plus for 3 allies prioritizing the highest attack, of course, and this does happen to be after ignition, but still regardless, you'll be running the Citri tap skill in the world boss trial. So definitely an amazing unit here. I would recommend you all to prepare her if you haven't yet done so already. Now moving on to our last two recommendations of the supporters here, we do have the first in this team being the light type supporter Citri. Of course, she is a staple for world boss trials due to the attack plus here on her slide skill. Now of course, she does scale very well when you do happen to ignite her to 3 stars, so just keep this in mind, but you'll still be using her even without ignition. She also does have slide skill cooldown minus here, as well as the slide skill damage plus for allies in the back row as well, of course prioritizing the highest attack. So definitely an amazing light type supporter here in lovey-dovey Citri. Make sure to use her if you do happen to have that's a light type supporter. And for the last recommendation here, we do have Tragedy Rusalka here. Now Rusalka is of course very highly prioritized due to her tap skill here, in which she does have skill gauge plus for 2 allies, prioritizing your attackers. So she'll be on pretty much every single world boss trial team, and definitely an amazing fire type supporter. So that'll pretty much do it for our supporter recommendations. Of course, there are some niche recommendations here as well, such as Tiwaz. You may happen to see her on some teams due to her tap skill here, since she does happen to have skill gauge plus for 2 allies, highest attack as well. So keep that in mind. You may see some supporters like Tiwaz here, as she's another great option if you do happen to have her invested into as well. So I would definitely add her onto the recommendations there. And of course, one more supporter that we almost forgot for some reason, in which we do have here Phantom Thief Lupin. She is amazing for helping your attackers crit, of course, so you'll definitely want to make sure to add Lupin onto your team. Definitely a staple supporter there for the world boss trials. She will be very strong as always, so make sure to add Lupin onto your roster if you do happen to have her. And if you don't have Lupin, then you can consider using Pantheon, since he is pretty much our budget Lupin, but you'll want to stick to Lupin if you do happen to have that character. Now moving on to the debuffer recommendations, everyone, we do have the staples here in self-depreciating Navi. She is very amazing for every single world boss trial, so if you do happen to have Navi, make sure to prepare her for our upcoming event. And moving on, we do have another staple in Lady Battery. She is yet again used in every single world boss trial event. Very strong units here in Lady Battery. Make sure to add her onto your team. As you can see, she does happen to have Dancing Blade, which does help with the defense minus, as well as inflicting damage over time and an additional set amount of defense minus here on her slide skill. So another amazing debuffer there. And moving on, we do have another staple in 5-star Oracle Werewolf, the light type debuffer. So she does help a ton here with the slide skill defense minus a certain percentage here on her slide skill, as well as on world bosses. She does have all skill damage defense minus a certain percentage here on her slide as well. So another amazing debuffer here for the world boss trials. Her drive skill is also pretty strong if you do happen to run it, as she does have debuff evasion minus, and of course an additional skill damage defense minus here on the drive skill as well. So another staple debuffer here. It's recommended to ignite her to at least 3 stars if you can manage to do so, as she does scale pretty well. So keep that in mind if you would like to invest into one of these staple debuffers. And moving on here, we do have Spear of Vengeance Lewin. Lewin is very amazing for every single world boss trial, since she does have debuff duration plus here on the slide skill, so make sure to keep that in mind. And also she does happen to be a wood type unit, which works very well alongside our other wood type supporters such as Maid Citri. And moving on here, we do have another debuffer in Kalaratri, which I do recommend for the debuff duration plus, so keep that in mind. You're pretty much only using Kalaratri for the debuff duration plus here on her slide skill, as of course there are many debuff duration plus debuffer units in the game. So of course, if you do happen to have others that are already invested into, then you can probably just skip out on Kalaratri. But of course, the other 4 here would be staples for every single world boss trial, so make sure to invest into those characters. Now moving on here to our last 2 recommendations, we do have the water type debuffer in Thetis. Now Thetis isn't used too often anymore, but I do recommend her since Plus. She may come in handy if you don't happen to have any of the other debuff duration plus units that are recommended. Now, the only con here to Thetis is pretty much her debuff blast, as she does remove one debuff from the boss, so that does suck a bit. So I would definitely recommend to stay away from Thetis if you do happen to have any of the other debuff duration extenders. But if Thetis is pretty much your only option, then you can add her onto your team. She does also happen to have poison in her kits, which may help out a bit as well, and considering she is a water type unit, maybe she'll slot into some teams. But definitely make sure to prioritize the other debuff extenders if you do happen to have any outside of Thetis. Now, for our final debuffer recommendation, we of course do have Embracing Mercury here. She's a staple for the World Boss Trials if you do happen to have her ignited to 8 out of 12 ignition, but of course for the Fire World Boss Trials, you'll use her regardless since she is a water type character, as she is our best weak point defense minus character for the World Boss Trials. She also does have evasion minus here, as well as the attack minus, which is very strong as well. So make sure to add Mercury onto your team if you do happen to have her. Now, if you don't happen to have Mercury, you can also consider using the wood type debuffer in Midas. Let's see if we do have him here. As you can see Midas on screen, he is the budget Mercury at this point. If you don't happen to have her, make sure to use him. But of course, if you do happen to have Mercury, then stay away from Midas and don't use him at all. Now, for the final set of recommendations, everyone, we do have the debuffers and healers for you newer players. Now, starting out, we do have the defenders, starting with Nephthys here. Now, Nephthys is very amazing as she does shield all of your allies, as well as she does have the pain adaptation here on her slide skill as well, which is very strong. So definitely make sure to use Nephthys here if you are struggling with survivability and would like to add a defender here that does happen to shield all of your allies. Now, you can also use the water type defender in Mars. Let's see if we can find her into the archive, as I don't happen to have this character any longer, so she should be down here somewhere. But there she is, zooming Mars. You'll want to use this character in zooming Mars if you don't happen to have Nephthys, as she does also shield all of your allies as well. But of course, Nephthys would be the prioritization over zooming Mars here at this point, due to the pain adaptation here on her slide skill and overall being the better world boss defender. Now, moving on, everyone, we do have the healers that are recommended for the world boss trial if you do happen to need additional sustainability. First up, we do have the new 5-star wood type healer in Freya. Now, of course, Freya does happen to heal all allies, and she does have debuff evasion plus here as well for 3 allies on her slide skill. So an amazing wood type healer. Definitely make sure to use her in the world boss trial if you did manage to obtain her during our current event, as she'll be very amazing for the next world boss and of course future world bosses as well. Now, moving on here, we do have another all heal recommendation here in Happy Elf. She'll be amazing as she does heal all allies and does happen to heal more than Mats. Now, if you don't happen to have Freya or Elf, then you can definitely just use Mats here. She should be enough for the team if you do happen to have her invested into already. So of course, make sure to use Mats if you do not want to invest into Freya or Elf. But of course, the highest prioritization would be Freya here due to the debuff evasion on her slide skill as well. Also, she does happen to be a wood type unit, which is very amazing. Now, for the final recommendation of healers for you beginner players that don't happen to have many 5-stars, then you can consider using Shining Letta. She is a very amazing healer here, and she does happen to heal all allies as well. So keep that in mind. If you don't happen to have any of the 5-star healers, you can consider using Shining Letta. So that'll pretty much do it for today's Destiny Child video and our recommendations for the upcoming world boss featuring Soul from Guilty Gear. So make sure to prepare some of those characters that you did see in today's video during this weekend's Hot Time event, and hopefully this pre-event guide did manage to help you out. And I'll be sure to have a graphic guide out here on the YouTube channel later next week as well. But before you go, everyone, make sure to let me know in the comment section below if this guide was helpful to you at all, and of course make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so already, as well as leave a like on this video. Also, make sure to check out channel memberships down below if you're interested in further supporting the channel, as well as make sure to check out the links in the description box below to my Twitch live stream channel, as well as to my Twitter account to stay updated for future YouTube videos and other posts as well. But with all of that being said, I'll catch you all in the next Destiny Child video. As always, thank you all so much for watching.